This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I mean, we've had offers, but we're not meant to be digital. There's enough information out there that you're getting lost. You're not being read. It's, there's mental health issues, all of that, right? You just get lost. We hear from people, they read our newspapers from page 1 to the very end. So they learn what's going on in their communities, and we want to keep it that way.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Galores. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. Okay, today on the podcast, I am joined by Karen Schneider. Karen is the publisher at the Oshkosh Herald, and I believe I just had it and I lost it in my tab. And I'm not sure your role, but you're connected with the Winnebago Media Group, which is kind of the broader company associated
Correct.
with that, right?
We just rebranded as Winnebago Media Group.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I looked at when I was digging through it and everything, but we can get into all that in a minute. Anyway, Karen, great to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, of course. I start every podcast the same, especially this is our first time meeting. I'd love if you could just kind of tell myself and the audience your background, your career in local media, and what's kind of led up to where you're at today.
So I'm actually a boomerang. Grew up in Wisconsin, moved out to Arizona, spent 25 years out there, and then I just relocated back here. It's already been 14 years, which is crazy. But when I moved out to Arizona, I started working at the Arizona Republic. So started working in accounts receivable, went to classified advertising, and then just really stayed in the advertising vein. I was a Scottsdale branch manager for a while. So that's where I got into the newspaper business on the advertising side. I also was the ad director for student media at Arizona State University for a couple of years and worked at a small weekly there before I went into, of all things, insurance and had an insurance business. But when I sold that agency is when I, had to figure out what do I want to do when I grow up. And my kids who were born and raised out in Phoenix had at that time told me they weren't staying in Arizona. They both did for a long time, but in fact, my son still lives there. But then I decided I was going to move back to Wisconsin. I figured if I liked it, I'd stay. If I didn't, I'd move back. So I moved back in June of 2012 and started working for Gannett. I was the GM ad director for 2 of their properties in Wisconsin before that job was eliminated. And so, for 20-some years, I've spent my career in the advertising element of it. A lot of people, because I'm the publisher or I was the general manager, the assumption is that I'm a journalist, and I'm not. That's not my background. I'm an advertising person who understands the value of local news.
Yeah, that's fantastic because it's funny. I don't have a journalism background. I work with news publishers and stuff, but I didn't realize before starting this podcast and taking kind of my crash course how divided like the editorial and business side is. And, everybody listening to this knows the struggles that local media has had. So I think that's why I love having people from advertising,
Right.
Business side of it on here to talk about that as well. And both sides,
Yeah. And they've really merged over the last, 15 years or so. And in fact, when I became the GM of the 2 newspapers here in Wisconsin, historically, that had always went to a newsroom person. So you would be a GM editor. And then they switched the landscape to GM ad director because they put the emphasis on the revenue. So And it's been 15 years, and let's face it, with the way that digital came into the newsrooms and so forth, the whole model changed and flip-flopped on its head.
Yep. Very cool. I also wanted to ask, you boomeranged between Wisconsin and Arizona. Do you just love
In
extreme
Arizona, yes.
temperatures on both ends? Or I was going to say I'm about in the middle here in Western Colorado, and it gets too hot and too cold for my liking here.
The entire time I lived out, when I moved back here, I'd always said I would never move back to Wisconsin. But once I did, it's like you learn the wonderful art of layering. And in Arizona, you can't go outside all the time. In Wisconsin, there might be 1 or 2 days where you really can't go outside or shouldn't. But otherwise, you just put layers on and you can do whatever you want. It would be really ugly in Arizona if you took too many layers off, let's face it. So.
That's hilarious. Could you tell us a little bit about Winnebago Media Group as an organization? It sounds like you're kind of more on the business side. Looks like you've kind of repurposed into I'm not sure the word, into a nonprofit. What's the business look like? What are the publications like? What's the business look like? Yeah.
So in 2018, we launched the Oshkosh Herald. I'm from Oshkosh. At the time, my husband's like, because I was no longer with Gannett, he's like, well, what do you want to do? What's your dream job? I'm like, we really need a local newspaper because there's just a huge void in really true uber local news. So he said, well, do a business plan and show me what it looks like. Let's just say I greatly underestimated the investment it would take to launch a weekly newspaper. And he probably would have pulled the plug, but we had people coming up to us everywhere we went thanking us. So he continued to support that while we got up and running. And what we did with the Oshkosh Herald was we rolled it out as every door delivery. So right away, we started going to like 30,000 homes and businesses in Oshkosh. So we did that. As it went along, we get emails and calls and letters from all over the place saying, when are you going to come to our city? When are you going to come to our town? And I'm like, I'm not, right? We have Oshkosh Herald LLC. I'm loving what we're doing. We're almost breaking even. We'll keep going. For the first 3 years we were in business, we did not have a staff reporter. We used all freelancers and community contributors. We had an editor, but the rest of the content was coming in from the community and so forth. So at 3 years, we finally hired our first FTE reporter. So we're going along on that road. I think we may have had a couple months where we finally were in the black, and someone from Neenah got me at a weak moment and said, why not us? And I'm like, well, they're in Winnebago County. Why not them? Right? So I don't think things through very logically. And a couple months later, we launched the Neenah News. It's in Winnebago County, so we're able to use our county coverage and so forth to share that. Interesting enough, I met with several of the leaders in that city, and one of them said, we don't assimilate with Winnebago County. They look further to the city to the north. I'm like, it doesn't really matter if you assimilate with that county. You are in that county.
Right.
What they do matters to your constituents and you. So that was in August of 2022. We rolled it out. Our first issue was when they opened their new high school. So we had a special section basically out the door. So we do that. We have locations in each city because you can't really be a local newspaper without a door to come in and talk to someone, right? At least that's my belief. So we do have offices in both locations. And so between those two, and Neenah is also an EDDM, it goes to every door in 54956, which is the majority of the footprint for the Neenah Joint School District. So we went along with that. And then when you get into different municipalities and everything comes with Oshkosh on it, there's this feeling of, what is the saying? The redheaded stepchild, because they feel a little left out or an afterthought. So when we took a look at that, it's like, well, we serve Winnebago County. And then taking a look at what does it look to be sustainable. So that's where it came in that we were going to rebrand from Oshkosh Herald LLC to Winnebago Media Group, Inc., so that we would encompass all of the markets that we serve under the umbrella of our corporate name.
Very cool. It's a cool story that you were getting the feedback because kind of started down the road of growing and expanding like that.
We still get calls from other places asking,
Huh.
when are you coming here? We're not, no.
The very first guest on this show, Mike Shapiro, who's been on a few times now, he has a company out on the East Coast, and he started one in his hometown. It was a digital thing, not a newspaper.
Mhm.
And the neighboring towns like, when are you bringing one here? When are you bringing one here? And that's kind of like his origin story too. So
Yeah.
it's kind of heard similar things before. Yeah.
People are, I mean, they miss that local news, right? And up until, I mean, really, the majority of things that impacted you as a consumer, as a citizen, and so forth really happened in your own backyard, right? What is your council doing? That's going to impact your property taxes. What are they doing with your water, your sewer? That's going to impact those fees that you're paying there. So much of what happens in your real life is happening in your own backyard. And if no one is covering that, no one's covering the plan commission or the common council or even your county board, all of a sudden you're surprised when you get hit with all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So where like Mike and we come in is that we come in and we tell you as they're going through the committees and getting on those agendas and so forth, what to expect. Now, we don't have the deep pockets to do investigative journalism or anything like that, but we are covering those meetings and telling you what's happening so you are aware and you have the opportunity as a citizen, as a consumer, to reach out to your elected officials or take action on those things, whether it's the school board or what have you. We're giving you that information. And the whole goal of going every door delivery was that there are people, I mean, there's a little over 40% in the Oshkosh market that receive free or reduced lunches. So there's economic disadvantages going on. And we didn't want being aware and informed of what was going on in your community to be a barrier for them, for those families and households to be informed as well, which is where the every door delivery came in. And we also put it online for free. You can download the PDF and read the Oshkosh Herald and Neenah News every single week.
Growing a successful business has never been easy. But whether you're navigating a complex industry or trying to reinvent one, our breadth of banking experts are here to collaborate on market-proven solutions. At KeyBank, we're built to grow with your changing needs because we're not just here for the business you are now, we're here for the business you'll become. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
Well, you kind of led into my next kind of question I had, touched on it a bit there of getting to everybody, having them be informed. Can you talk a little bit about launching 3 print newspapers starting in 2018 when everybody's running and screaming away from print? And, maybe not without massive investment from some corporate thing or, huge grants from what I could tell or anything like that. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Yeah.
So this is, fortunately, I have a very supportive husband who believed in my dream because it's all personally financed. We haven't received big grants or anything like that. So for Neenah and Oshkosh, we're advertising supported newspapers. And that's, as you grow, like when we first launched, I shared we needed to be 24 pages, 65% advertising to break even. That was in 2018. I cannot even tell you how many postage increases or newsprint increases we have had during that time. So it's always a challenge, right? Sustainability. But the way so we didn't have those big financial donors in there. We do have a membership program where people who value the local news that they're receiving in their mailbox on a weekly basis, they will take out a $50 a year membership, and then we give them spiffs throughout the year and so forth. We do subscriptions, and to be honest, we lose money on the subscriptions based on the postage, but it's one of our missions, right, is to keep you informed. So launching the 2 newspapers, people thought I was absolutely out of my mind. I mean, let's face it, they thought I was crazy. I spoke to various leaders and things like that. And the city manager of Oshkosh at the time said, that it's great because, to be honest, although he may get nervous and kind of twinge when he sees the media calling him, his comment was, I don't get those phone calls enough anymore. So, they realize as leaders of the community that what they're doing needs to be shared as well. Otherwise, they're left holding the bag, so to speak, too, that they're working in a vacuum and no one is sharing with the community what is being done. So I can say, as crazy as it sounds, is that besides the financial challenges, launching the paper was interesting because trying to get printing quotes was way harder than it should have been. I called probably a half dozen different printers around our area. Not one of them called me back, and one of them basically is like, "You're nuts," right? So the impression I got was almost that, for one, what kind of crazy woman would start a newspaper in this day and age? I happened to sit on a board with someone connected to one of the printing places that I had called. And so they started printing the Oshkosh Herald when we first rolled off for the first 6 months. And this is something I talked to newspaper industry organizations about, because a lot of them have these rules that you have to be in business 6 months or you have to be publishing for a year before you can join them. Well, the problem was they weren't returning my calls or emails either when I was soliciting guidance on systems or printers or different things that you need to run a business, but a newspaper business. But I can tell you, at 6 months, my phone rang, and it was one of the associations looking to talk to me, to have me join. And the same thing with one of the other ones here. Once I was a year old, they were calling, and it's like, I could have really used you at the beginning for connections and guidance and stuff. And so that's one of the things, too. It's like, we know it's a difficult business to be in. We also know that it brings value to our communities. But if our own industry associations are not going to give us a hand up before we get to that threshold of becoming a member, you're going to have less and less members. You have to be there to help the people out who are making the effort to make sure that good, local journalism and news is there in their backyard so folks know what's going on. But it was easier, in a sense, starting and launching the newspapers than acquiring one. I started my own insurance agency out in Arizona, the Oshkosh Herald and Neenah News. They were both launched. They were birthed, but we acquired the Winnebago News, which is a small bedroom community, also in Winnebago County. It's been running for 155 years here in this community. And the publisher had passed away, and his wife was looking for someone else to continue it. And she had deal after deal after deal fall through. And we take a look at it, and it's like, do you have the capacity to do this? Well, not really, but also this is where Dave Ramsey would say you're an awful business person. It's the heart. You cannot let the heart of a community close its doors. So we acquired the Winnebago News about 18 months ago. We've definitely had some growing pains, right? I have the way I run the other 2 newspapers, and there's a culture here. So trying to make sure that we get the best of both as we go forward. It hasn't been without its challenges, but it's also brought a lot of blessings. And that's where we come with 3 newspapers that we reach over 90,000, the people that live here in Winnebago County.
That's frustrating that the organizations, when you really needed them, kind of wouldn't return your calls. I had Laura Rearwin Ward, she's in California, who did something similar. It was different issues with the California newspaper. I forget the name of it, but she had issues, and she had actually started a different one because of some issues like that. It's like a secondary kind of industry for things like that. And then also the challenges with the postal service. I had a guy recently, Jordan Breckenser from Vermont News and Media, I think, in rural Vermont. And about half our episode was him talking about the struggles with the postal service and getting it to work, and it sounded like bashing his head into a wall over and over again, from what I recall.
Well, and I will admit, we have some issues there, but in the big scheme of things, we're mailing 55,000 copies out on a weekly basis. Less than 0.25% of those people may reach out to us on a weekly basis for not getting their newspaper. And 0.25% of 55,000 is a lot, and it's time consuming and everything. But if you had that same percentage in a different industry, you'd be like, sweet, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And we have, at least here locally, our post offices have been fantastic partners. And we've had instances. So Oshkosh is a university town, right? You have the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. Well, for years, we'd been mailing to this particular postal route. And finally, the postmaster comes to meet with me, and he's like, Karen, 70% of these on a weekly basis are being returned because we can't leave them because the students aren't picking up their mail. So then you can no longer put anything in those mailboxes, right? Well, that was basically like 700 copies a week. We're printing and paying postage for who knows how long. So at that point, it was like, okay, how do we fix this? So we ran house ads for, I think, like 3 months for the people in that route, that if you want to continue to get the Oshkosh Herald, call us, we'll give you a courtesy subscription. And we eliminated that route because it was financially better to mail, higher postage subscriptions to the people in that postal route than continuing to throw away 700 copies a week. That just makes me sick thinking about the revenue that went into the dumpster, right?
Yeah.
But we went through a few other postmasters who never took the time to come and say, look, we have an issue here, let's fix it. So they're one of those that will do that. I mean, they've been really kind to us because, some of our papers can get a little large and heavy, especially, if we have special sections and we have inserts in there. And the carriers, I have empathy for them because that's a lot of weight. So we're not looking at them as like they're our vendor and you have to do this. We're looking at them, they're our partner, and we take things into consideration when that stuff is happening because we know it's a lot. We also know they're very, very short-staffed.
Yeah.
We also know there's a lot of things being done to them above their level that they have no control over. So working in even the newspaper industry with Gannett and that happening, you have to have empathy and a little bit of patience when dealing with situations that come up. I know we're not as bad as some of the other places in the country where their papers aren't even getting delivered.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, agreed. So I had this question. I'm going to turn this into a 2-part question. I've talked a little bit about the editorial and the business side. You were talking about kind of the business model, 65% ads at 24 pages, and you have subscriptions, which aren't necessarily turning a profit. But I'd like to hear what all is hitting the cash register. You don't have to share numbers or anything, but that's sustainability is a part of the show. And then also kind of the decision to transition to a nonprofit and how that's worked out for you and kind of the decision-making that went behind that. Okay. Is that too big of a question? Kind of a two-parter.
No, not at all. That's actually what we're rolling out right now because the rebranding to Winnebago Media Group is very new, very, very new. The reason, so we did that to encompass our 3 markets and be more inclusive, but it's also with the transition to becoming a 501c3, my family owns these newspapers, right? Which means as a small employer, when things come up short, you fill the gap. So we're looking at this as a sustainability. We've been doing this for 8 years, right? Yeah, 8 years. We've added newspaper markets in. Again, Dave Ramsey would not like me, okay? So the balance sheet isn't something that everyone would say, ooh, I want that. So when we're looking at sustainability, our mission was to bring really good, valued local journalism to our communities. You could go digital. We've had offers, but we're not meant to be digital. There's enough information out there that you're getting lost. You're not being read. It's, there's mental health issues, all of that, right? You just get lost. We hear from people, they read our newspapers from page 1 to the very end. So they learn what's going on in their communities, and we want to keep it that way. So for sustainability, by going as a nonprofit, One, we're gifting those businesses to the community, right? We no longer own them. I'm the executive director, publisher, but I am no longer the owner of 3 newspapers. That took a little bit, why you're doing it, but at the same time to just kind of hand it over is a little different as well. But we've been told, I have, by people who work in community foundations, we have donors who would support you, but you're not a nonprofit. We're a for-profit that has no profit, right? And 90-some% of newspapers would probably tell you the same thing. We're a for-profit that's operating like a nonprofit. So the idea is, I'm in my 60s, so we have to, you need a sustainability plan, and we want to keep our mission alive of bringing good local journalism and news and information to the people of our communities. So by rolling this out, we have a smaller board to launch. So we have 3 people right now. The next year or so, we'll add 2 more. So you have a 7-person board. And at that point, I should be at that retirement age, right? I can stay on whatever it is. The community needs to own it. So if this is important to you, the community needs to own it. And it doesn't take a whole lot of people paying $50 a year to get something to be sustainable, especially if you're putting 55,000 copies out. You don't need 55,000 people to give you $50. But if they value what you're doing and there's some grants and other things out there, that's going to make that product sustainable and keep delivering on the mission of providing good local journalism so your community is informed, because a healthy community is an informed community. You don't want them being blindsided. So that was a really long answer to why did we go this route? And it's really about financial sustainability and making sure that there's ownership in the community to keep it moving forward. Because we get to a point that as a family, you can't. Especially, I'll give an example. We get increases all the time. We got another one right after we decided, these are our new rates, right? Because we're always in arrears. We're always trying to play catch up. So we get a call from our printer that my newsprint costs will be going up $2,000 a month. That's
Jeez.
A person. So making those are the balls that you keep in the air, trying to make sure that you're providing a really good product, you're paying your bills, you're paying your people. And, there are times that my biggest guilt is that I cannot pay a living wage to all of my people. That's a big guilt. They're with me because they believe in the mission as well. So I've been very, very blessed that way with a great staff. But could they go to McDonald's probably and make more money? Yeah. But they believe in the mission. And I'm blessed that they're there. At the same time, the hope would be eventually, especially as the nonprofit, and you realize some savings, that you'll be able to compensate those people the way they should be, or at least closer to what they should be.
Great stuff. Great. My kind of last question I had down, you kind of touched on it a bit there. It sounds like you've got some planning going forward with the nonprofit designation and everything, but what's this look like in 5 years for you? For yourself personally and for Winnebago? Where do you see it? If things go the way you want it to go in five years from now.
Yeah. So in 5 years, if it goes the way I hope, I'm hoping that I am at least semi-retired and that we have a really strong board and we have community support, that the community and the people of the company know that the work that we continue to do at that time, it'd be 13 years, right? That work is going to continue on, and they will continue to have a well-informed community and hopefully see more activism as well. Anecdotally, we've seen more people run for office and different things since we launched. And, part of it is is it because they know more, that they're hearing more, whatever the case may be, but, that we have informed citizens that are involved with it. And the reason they're involved is because they know what's going on, and that the papers of Winnebago Media Group are part of that helps to continue those healthy communities.
Very cool. Karen, that's everything I had. Where can people find you online? What do you want me to link to? What do you want to promote in the show notes? All that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So WinnebagoMediaGroup.com is the one we just launched. That's the fundraising page. And then each newspaper has their own URL as well, which would be OshkoshHerald.com and NeenahNews.com. We do not put the PDF of Winneconne up because we did try that when we first took it over, and our subscriptions dropped dramatically. Instantly. And people said, I'm not paying for it if you're giving it for free. And so, I mean, that lasted probably 2 months, and we said, fine, we won't give it to you for free. So
that easy solution.
Exactly. So Neenah and Oshkosh are the ones that can be found online. And then it is WinnebagoMediaGroup.com. I kept the .com versus .org for the parent company as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll link to all that. So if you're listening, you can just scroll down and click on it and everything. And yeah, cool. Karen, this is a great story. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
I appreciate the connection and you taking yours. It was great talking to you.
Awesome. Yeah, likewise. Right. You have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Paul. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.